So roll forward, we come to the end of a divided Germany, and Germany is reunited, and you were able to investigate what had happened in this incident by looking at the now open Stasi files. So what was revealed there?
There were a number of things that helped move the story on. All I had by, say, 2005 was a slightly dented thermos, a photograph of the car with the brigadier and his driver before the incident, and a photograph of the car after the incident. Now, this was a 40,000 Deutschmark car, to which 64,000 Deutschmarks worth of damage had been done. But I didn't have anything really to prove that this had ever happened. Indeed, I'd never told my wife about it. We weren't allowed to talk about these things at the time. But you can now apply for your secret police, your East German secret police file. And so I applied for mine, and after about 3 years, it turned up. And in it were a whole series of documents about the incident at Artenstedt. And subsequently, I gained from the Stasi archives the actual incident report for this particular incident at Artenstedt. Now, the first thing I discovered was that it wasn't the first, by any means, the first incident at Artenstedt. There had been 2 serious incidents with the American liaison mission in 1978 and 1979. 1979, the Americans had been rammed very severely and quite deliberately, as indeed we had been. And it turned out that this was actually a well-planned East German secret police operation, and that it had been triggered by the secret police. There's even an audio tape of the secret police contacting the radar site and telling them to stand by because we were on our way. And the file has all the photographs of the incident, showing us making cups of tea, showing the damaged vehicle, even showing me with my cup of coffee just before I projected it at the Stasi agent. And the reports say how appallingly I behaved in a sort of terroristic manner towards their agents. But they're quite clear from the civilian police, East German civilian police, who describe it as a traffic accident. So I think they must have written the report before the incident even happened. But this was very much a deliberate assault.
And though the documents were redacted, you were able to identify the driver of the truck that rammed you.
Indeed, the civil police report on the incident redacted the name, but gave the date of birth and the village from which the driver had been recruited. And the secret police files redacted all his other details, but gave me his name. So I knew he was Mr. Hartmut Lüderitz, and he'd been a non-commissioned officer in the East German Air Force, and he had driven the truck that day. Now, a German lady who was researching the military missions, I asked her if she could find Mr. Lüderitz, and sure enough, she managed to find him living in the village next door to the one from which he'd been recruited in 1980. So not much has changed in East Germany. And she said, would he like to meet me on the ground? And he sent a message back saying that he hadn't any real objection to meeting me, so long as I was willing to appreciate that he was only acting under orders. So I considered that was quite normal and said, yes, let's meet. So in the summer of 2011, Mr. Hartmut Lüderitz and I met on the ground at Artenstedt, which is no longer a radar site. It now has a large wind turbine, just showing how things move on. And we met there. Unfortunately, the fruit tree that had saved our lives has since gone away, but he's very much there, and I was there. So it was interesting to meet him, and I said to him, what happened? And he said, well, of course, it was a deliberate operation. And he said it was the job of the duty non-commissioned officer at the radar site to drive the truck. And he was the chef, the cook at the radar site, and it was his turn as the duty NCO to drive the truck if the secret police rang up. They did, and so an officer sitting next to him, and they sure enough came charging out of the main gate and rammed into us. But he claimed that he had dabbed the brakes at the last moment and so had not hit us with the full velocity that he would otherwise have done.
And what was his reward for carrying out?
Well, it was quite interesting that there was a reward for launching this ambush successfully, and he was given 2 weeks extra leave as a well done for having crashed into us. And I said, well, what would have happened had you killed us? Ah, he said, we knew that had we killed you, we would have got 4 weeks extra leave and 1,000 marks bonus. So I said, well, I'm very pleased that this was not the case. But for me, it's given me great satisfaction to be able to go back through both the American archives, but more particularly the East German secret police archives, and reconstruct this incident, which, amongst other things, has reassured me that I didn't invent the whole thing anyway. But there it is.
And so what was the East Germans' motivation? Because the idea that they would want to kill three allied people in a car which was protected by a certain diplomatic status almost.
The East German authorities, as indeed the West German authorities faced by the Soviet liaison missions in West Germany, but the East German authorities had always found the Western military missions, British, French, American, an irritant. Why were these people allowed to operate on East German sovereign soil but without any East German authority over them? And there had been a very high level decision taken in the mid-1970s that enough was enough, and what we need to do is give the Western missions a sufficiently scary moment that they decide that it's not worth the risk to their personnel, and that the missions will close down. And the two rammings that had happened at Artenstedt against the Americans, one in 1978, one in 1979, were in many ways the first evidence of this, had we known, been able to join the dots up. Our crash in 1982 was a very serious attempt to kill us, and it had just failed. And in fact, they went on in 1984 to ram a French military liaison mission vehicle in the town of Halle, and this was rammed again on an East German secret police authorised operation. Again, a large 10-ton truck was slammed into the French touring vehicle, which was a Mercedes saloon car. Ours had been an Opel Senator saloon car, but the French Mercedes was very, very badly damaged, and one of the warrant officers travelling in the vehicle, Warrant Officer Mariotti, was killed on that occasion.
And the Soviet attitude was actually very different, wasn't it? There was a kind of convenience between both sides in this, at that level. You were telling me about what happened during the crisis over General Jaruzelski in Poland.
For the Soviets, just as for the three Western allies, the missions were reciprocal, and so any restrictions on us in East Germany we would mirror in West Germany. But to both sides of the Iron Curtain, as it were, there was an advantage to having boots on the ground, eyes on the ground, who could see if things were getting out of hand. And indeed, in the late 70s, early 80s, the crisis in Poland, the Soviet authorities in East Germany made it quite clear by a nod and a wink to the Western military missions, liaison missions, that we could, if we so wished, patrol the East German autobahns, the motorways, all the way up to the Polish border in order to reassure our own governments that there was no build-up of Soviet equipment waiting to invade Poland in the way that they had gone in 1968 to invade Czechoslovakia. So the military missions at a grand strategic level provided reassurance to both sides on the Iron Curtain that there wasn't an escalation, a covert escalation towards war.